Well, Razorback fans, we know all of you are excited about Arkansas and Ole Miss this weekend, so it is time for a special edition with a Locked On crossover of the Locked On Razorbacks podcast, as well as Locked On Ole Miss.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going into the Thunderdome. It's the dumbest game in the SEC schedule. It's the dumbest game every year. Something ridiculous happens. There's 7 overtimes. There's 4th and 25. There's weird 2-point conversions. There's the hit that happens that somehow at the corner of the end zone, he does not go out of bounds. This game is absolutely bizarre. And John, we only get to do this once a year.
I know. We talk about so many games and teams in the SEC, that's rivalries and epic games and epic matchups, but I feel like Arkansas and Ole Miss get slept on a lot because it's strange, and I know your Ole Miss audience probably won't want to hear this, but Arkansas has not had much success against many SEC teams over the past 10 years, but for some reason, Ole Miss, they've had their fair share of good games against them. So I know that Ole Miss fans probably don't feel great about this game. Arkansas fans don't feel about this game, but I think we're both in agreement that it's going to get weird, it's going to get drunk, and it's going to get crazy in Fayetteville.
Yeah, and it absolutely is. And the weird thing about this is it doesn't feel like it, but Ole Miss is going for their 5th win in 7 games against Arkansas. Their only 2 losses have been the 2 games in Fayetteville. Ole Miss can beat Arkansas in Little Rock. They can beat them in Oxford. In Fayetteville, something is going wrong.
Which is weird because for the past year and a half, 2 years, Arkansas's worst performances in football have been at home in Fayetteville. The year that Arkansas, you mentioned it 2 years ago, where Arkansas was up, I believe, 42-7 in the beginning of the third quarter. And I think Ole Miss ended up making it a closer game in the final score, but it wasn't close at all. But I remember watching that game, and I'm like, hold on a second. So this is the same Razorback team that beat Cincinnati only by a touchdown at home, that needed a last-minute punt return to beat Bobby Petrino and Missouri State at home, that had some of their worst performances at home, but yet they blow out Ole Miss, who was actually a really good team that year. It just shows how much or how little sense that this game makes each and every year.
Yeah, it's fun. And the show that's going to air a little bit later on tonight, I talk about like the SEC is getting ready to probably go to 9 conference games. And part of that, the 3 permanent rivals that Ole Miss is going to have is Mississippi State, LSU, and Arkansas. And the drunkenness of this game makes me really enjoy that this game is on the schedule. I'm sure Ole Miss fans would rather have Vanderbilt on the schedule, although maybe not after this year. But it's a situation. It's fun. It's Arkansas, for the longest time in the SEC, they came in and had Southwest Conference feel to them. They were the westernmost team in the SEC. So they were a little bit different. You saw teams that had all their bands, they sounded the same, all the SEC schools. Arkansas sounded a little bit different. The William Tell stuff, the calling the Hogs, and all of that gave them a unique ability. And Ole Miss has been playing Arkansas every year since 1981. So I just enjoy this game. Now, the rivalry is there. If you want to go by my YouTube comments and my Twitter comments and all that, Arkansas fans are pretty good to tell me that I'm a dumbass. But I do enjoy this game.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard not to. And again, if you're a Razorback fan, there's so many games of note. I remember as a young kid watching, I remember where I was when that 7 overtime game between Matt Jones and Eli Manning in 2001. And I mentioned this on Twitter, where it's funny how Arkansas played in a 7 overtime, then a 6 overtime, then a 7 overtime game in 3 straight years. Nothing happens. But as soon as LSU and A&M play in a 7 overtime game, they got to change all the rules. But still, at that point in time, it was such an iconic and legendary game because no one had seen anything like that before. Mm-hmm. And there's been a lot of that where it's not just, it's a good old-fashioned game. No, there's stuff that happens in this game that no one has seen before. That 2015 Hunter Henry heave, which I know still is in the crawl of Ole Miss fans because that's the game that kept them out of the SEC Western title. Mm-hmm. But no one has seen anything like that before in overtime. It just doesn't make sense. So it's not just a game that features teams going back and forth or, having some weird things happen like a fumble or interception. No, we're talking about things that are pretty historic and pretty legendary that you just don't see happen in college football in general.
Yeah, in 2021, the Matt Corral game, the KJ Jefferson game that ended up on a 2-point convert. just weird stuff has happened. And I do fear, that game, the drunkenness of the game is going to kind of switch over to Mississippi State now that Jeff Lebby is over there and their allergicness to defense, apparently. So a lot of weird stuff can happen, but even in years that you don't expect something weird to happen, there was the Chad Morris versus Matt Luke game in Little Rock. I mean, it's just one of those things where you look at it before the game and you're like, this is going to be gross. And then you watch the game and you're like, what?
Yeah.
How does that happen?
Well, it's still same thing with the 2020 game. 6 interceptions thrown by Matt Corral, where I think he threw 13 total that year, and like 6 of them came there, and 5 of them came in a different game that year. So Hudson Clark, as I've referred to as the no-fly zone, still on the team. The guy that had 3 interceptions in that game against Matt Corral, still on the team, and I think he only has 2 more interceptions since that point in time, and he's played and started every year. So, yeah, again, we could go on and on and on about just how many instances there are of these two teams meeting up and having the weirdest of things happen. And that's where I don't know how you feel about it, but I'm kind of leaning into, because I feel that way about this game, probably means this game is going to be the most normal and boring game of all time. And it'll just be like, oh, yeah, that was pretty anticlimactic, because 11 a.m. game, chances of a little bit of rain, but maybe not there in Fayetteville. I think that potential's there for it to get crazy, but I also feel like Arkansas, anytime I feel like the game's going to get crazy, ends up being a real downer. So we'll see.
I think this has a chance to be a 17-10 game.
Honest,
I think that it's going to fool everybody by the fact that both of these teams' defenses, I mean, Arkansas's defense did really well against Tennessee. Their supposed high-powered offense and what's going on. They did just enough for that Bobby Petrino offense to go down and score a touchdown and get the win. I think that something similar is going to happen because Ole Miss's defense is just as good as Tennessee. So I'm thinking a relatively low-scoring game. If it's a high-scoring game, Ole Miss is probably going to win this game going away. But I think it's going to be somewhere 17-10, 17-13, 20-13, that range.
Now, I'll be shocked if this game gets high scoring, because I'm going to be honest right now. To me, the key number for Arkansas on points that they score is 24. If Arkansas scores 24 points, they win the game. That's how I feel about it. Anything less than that, they more than likely lose. Because the one thing that Arkansas, which their offense has improved as the year's gone on, I'm not taking the Mississippi State game as a measuring stick, because that defense is so bad. I mean, it is so bad. So you can't, you can gain some confidence from it, but you can't look at it as any sort of correlation into this one. But the one thing that Arkansas has at times struggled against, and when they struggled against it, it ends up being their downfall offensively, is sacks. And when against A&M, that defensive front ate Arkansas up. And luckily, Arkansas's defense was really good in that game, and they held Marcel Reed to where it was at least a good matchup. Arkansas lost 21-17. But you're talking about going up against Ole Miss, that they get after the quarterback, man. And if they get after Taylor Green, they put that pressure on him. Yeah, it could be a long day for Arkansas. And it could honestly turn into a game like Arkansas had against LSU a couple weeks ago, where Arkansas loses like 34-10. I could absolutely see that happening.
Yeah, and Taylor Green obviously is going to give Ole Miss fans nightmares because of the Matt Jones comparison. When you see him running around, I know he's not the same quarterback that Matt Jones was, but when you see this long, lanky, long strider running around on the football field, you can't help but make that comparison.
Oh, I know. And I'm so glad that you remember Matt Jones, because it's like, I feel like kids these days, they forget about just how incredible Matt Jones was. I mean, just being honest, a 6'6", 240-pound quarterback. He ran a 4.37. All right. Like that's almost as fast as Michael Vick at the NFL Combine. So yeah, he was awesome. And there is some similarities there. I would say that the thing going for Taylor Green over Matt Jones is that Taylor Green does have a better arm than Matt Jones, and he has a better coordinator in Bobby Petrino. So that's really helped him. But the issue is that, Matt Jones was the type of player that never let anything bother him. He could be down 3 scores. He could be up 3 scores. He's going to be the same dude. Well, when Taylor Green's had the pressure on him and he's lost a little bit of confidence or whatever, it got bad. And that's what happened in that A&M game. It got bad. But Taylor Green, has played so much better over the past few weeks. If Ole Miss can't get to him and he's allowed to stand back there and do Taylor Green things, get that confidence, then it might be a big day for Arkansas in that offense. But it's just about pressure. It's as simple as that. Can Ole Miss get pressure? If they do, it's going to be bad. But if they can't get to them, Taylor Green and that offense is good enough to make them pay for it.
Thanks again for watching the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. When we come back, we talk about some more of the storylines in the games and some players to watch. You're not going to want to miss that. Stick around.
We'll continue our discussion here on the Locked On Razorbacks podcast with the Locked On crossover of Locked On Rebels. But first, got to tell you about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because you got to get ready to tackle the NFL action right here on FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything that you need to place live bets on, all in the NFL, all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NFL.
All right, we are back in Thunderdome. John Neighbors from Locked On Razorbacks is in the house. We're talking about this football game that is the dumbest of the dumb games that happens every single year. And this year's edition is in Fayetteville. And of course, for Ole Miss to proceed and stay in the conversation for the playoffs, they have to get a win in Fayetteville. And that hasn't happened. Listen, John, I had Bill Flowers on my show on Wednesday. He was a part of the Ole Miss football team that went up to Fayetteville and won in 2000. I asked him, what do you remember about that game? And he said, sometime in the third period, a person came out and started streaking on the field with nothing but a hog nose on his junk.
Yep.
And everybody was laughing their tail off. And that's all he could remember from that game.
Yep, dude. And again, that's awesome too, because that is a game that is another instance of craziness that I had completely forgot about. But I do remember that game well, because that was before it was on TV. That game wasn't even worthy of being on Jefferson Pilot back in the day. Like it was an 11 a.m. kick at some point. But I remember it was a student and he had the big hog hat on and he had, as you said, a Razorback thong with a hog on his junk. And Arkansas was in the huddle. Like they had the ball. And I remember he goes up and he pinches Matt Jones in the butt he's from behind. He turns around. He's like, what the crap? And he sees this guy just walking around. Then the dude got nailed by the Arkansas state sheriff. And they took him out pretty quickly. But that was a pretty iconic moment too. And I've been trying to, actually, it's funny. I've tried to find that guy and to talk to him 20 years after the fact. I'd love to get that story, but yes, that right there, if you want to have a still image of what sums up this series, just that right there, that sums it up.
Yeah, the meme, if you want to look at this game versus other games, it's that meme of John Daly and Tiger Woods where he's smoking a cigarette in the driver's range. That John Daly meme is the Ole Miss Arkansas game.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and that's what makes it so much fun, because if you even think about the coaches that they've had go head to head, you think of course, back when it was Houston Nutt versus Cutcliffe, there was a lot more about Eli Manning, in the Manning deal. And then after that, you had when Houston Nutt left for Ole Miss from Arkansas, and Arkansas went up with Bobby Petrino. You had that era. And then you had an era of Brett Bielema and Hugh Freeze, which, again, for whatever reason, Bielema had Hugh Freeze's number in some crazy times. And then, of course, now you have Pittman and Kiffin, which I don't think you could have more opposite personalities and approaches than what Kiffin and Pittman are. But I don't know how you feel about it too, Steven. I feel like Pittman and Kiffin actually really like each other and respect each other. I'm not saying that, that's anything new for coaches, but just going off of the past few years of what Pittman said about Kiffin and what I've heard Kiffin say about Pittman and their interactions on the field and stuff, it seems like there's a lot of respect between the two.
I don't know of anybody probably in their right mind that doesn't respect Sam Pittman. And
yeah.
I know he's a hard person not to like. So, yeah, I would completely buy that if I just Lane Kiffin and Sam Pittman like each other.
Yeah.
And who is that one?
Well, that one is, I guess there's actually technically two. I know Brett Bielema's one that does not like Sam Pittman, because Pittman was his offensive line coach there at Arkansas. And when Pittman left, the offensive line went downhill bad. And Bielema kept trying to take credit for why the offensive line was good before. It wasn't Pittman, it was him. So I know that there's that. And also Eli Drinkwitz, because no one likes Eli Drinkwitz. And I know Pittman doesn't like Eli Drinkwitz, and I know Drink doesn't like Pittman. So
what do you think's up with Drink? Now Drink seems to be the most fake person out there.
Yes.
Period. Everything he's doing is playing a role when the camera's on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's the perfect coach for Missouri because at a place like Missouri, the only way you can get attention is by being obnoxious and stupid and doing weird things and being fake. And that's what he's done. I mean, that's why he's a perfect fit there. You got to go above and beyond to get everyone's attention and doing things in recruiting. But yeah, I mean, people know how I feel about Drinkwitz. I mean, that dude called me out by name at SEC Media Days. I mean, come on. Like that's crazy talk that this dude cares about what a podcast host has to say about him. But yeah, I'm not a fan of his. And also the whole thing of standing on business and then running away from Josh Heupel when he's shaking his hand. And then the thing with the A&M player that he got like ripped for by Elko earlier this year. I don't know. He's a clown, man. He's a clown.
Yeah. Or the what was it against Alabama where he was down 34-0? It's like, hey, if we had our quarterback, it'd be a different story. Not at 34-0, it wouldn't have been.
No, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. And here's the thing too. Like, yeah, every team's not going to be as good without their quarterback. 100%. That's true. But like getting beat 34-0 to a Bama team that's not that great. I mean, they're good, but not that great.
That's a Bama team that lost to Vandy.
Yeah. It's like you're telling me that your starting quarterback meant 0 points for you. If that, to me, that's more of an indictment on him because that shows you didn't have your backup ready. Because your backup, I'm not saying he's as good, but at least when Taylor Green got hurt against Tennessee, guess what? Malachi Singleton let him down for a touchdown. So maybe you just need to have your back. Yeah.
Back weeks, he didn't have Drew Pine ready.
Yeah. So have your backup quarterback ready, and then maybe, just maybe, you'll be able to be a little bit more successful than scoring 0 points. Because I'm guarantee you, me and you could go in there and score 0 points as quarterback. We could probably do that.
Yeah, it's like it's like after the Ole Miss Kentucky game. I could lose to Kentucky. I could make that happen. It's one of those situations. Well, anyway, let's get back in the story on for Ole Miss. Ole Miss is a little bit in a transition phase on their team. This is not the Lane Kiffin Ole Miss teams of 2020, 2021, and 2022. They are getting out of the always going forward on fourth down. They're getting out of that type of stuff because of how good their defense is. Against Oklahoma, there was a little bit of remnants in the second quarter where they tried to go for a fourth down. They got stopped. Oklahoma went down, scored a touchdown. And instead of being at halftime 13-7 Ole Miss, you're down 14-10 or something like that. And the third quarter, that just stopped. There was no more. If there was a time, it was fourth down, it was time to punt or kick a field goal. Every drive is going to end with a kick. We're going to stop them on third down. We're going to drive the ball. And kind of that, what we used to always joke about with Alabama of joyless murder ball kind of popped in, and it was 13-0. And Oklahoma had absolutely no hope. And in the fourth quarter, I think 5 out of the last 7 plays, they sacked the quarterback.
Yeah, that's wild to me. And this is just an outsider's perspective looking in about Ole Miss, and I'm sure the Ole Miss fans will get mad at me for even asking this question, but I'm serious. If I was an Ole Miss fan, I'd be very pissed off. I'm just gonna be honest. Like I would be pissed off by the way that this season has gone, and it's crazy because you're 6-2 and your 2 losses were by 3 points to SEC foes. But that Kentucky game is, oh, man, that's a bad look. Yeah. That is a bad look. And then the LSU game. You should have won that game because you did every single thing to win, except for it's kind of reminding me of that Oklahoma State game Arkansas had earlier in the year. They beat them in every stat. They doubled them up on offensive yards, except the thing that matters the most, which is points. So, and it's weird also to see where going into this game, I'm more concerned about Ole Miss's defense than I am the offense. Not to say that the offense isn't good because they can score. I mean, they're perfectly capable of that. But it's just so strange to face a Lane Kiffin coached Ole Miss team and be like, hey, the defense is what's going to win this game for them, not necessarily the offense. And seeing that Oklahoma got sacked, what was it, 9 times in that game? 10 sacks, and no offense, but you only win 26-14? Like that's also mind-blowing to me. It's like, 10 sacks? That's absurd. Like anybody would it'd be a great season for an individual player to have 10 sacks in 13 games. And then
6 of those sacks were in the fourth quarter in like the last 3 minutes.
Right. Well, good point. But my point is like, that's what's been kind of weird about this Ole Miss team that I've just, again, outsider's perspective where it's almost like they have one really good thing that they do in a game, but then there's something else that ends up bringing that type of performance down, which they still won, but they're just a hard team to figure out. They're a hard team to figure out. I think they're good, but at the same time, like what's their what you tell me what's the best win on the season for them right now? Is it South Carolina?
Yeah, it's probably South Carolina at the moment. I think I say all the time the biggest rival in college sports right now is Ole Miss versus clean football. Yeah, I mean, it's a penalty, it's a turnover, it's something like the Kentucky game was like a clinic in how to not play football. I mean, it was completely rough. But whenever Ole Miss plays its best and they play clean, there's nobody in the country that can beat them. Nobody.
Yeah. And that's like, I'm not trying to say Arkansas is the same, because I think Ole Miss, on paper, better team than Arkansas. But that's been the key for Arkansas too, is the games that Arkansas has won the turnover battle or tied for the turnover battle, they've won every single one of them. And then the games that they haven't, they've lost every single one of them. So to me, I know we're going to talk a lot about this game, but to me, that's the key, is like, as weird, maybe not who plays the cleanest, but who sucks the less at this game. That might be the one. Yeah. Who screws up the least amount of times? It's probably going to be the one that wins this game.
Yeah. And what I was talking about earlier with the Lane Kiffin being in transition, and what he learned against Oklahoma, if he would have played from the third quarter on, like he did against Oklahoma, against Kentucky, he wins that game by 2 scores and he beats LSU as well.
Yeah. And
Ole Miss is 7-0 if they just play that way. All they have to do is just not go for a single fourth down, and Ole Miss is 7-0 or 8-0 right now. That's absolutely nuts to think about, but that is the case. It's ink. The ink is dried on that. It's happened. You have to figure out what's going on. And Ole Miss is going up to Fayetteville with their season on the line, with all the hype they had going in the preseason. You have to beat Arkansas. If Ole Miss beats Arkansas, there's a likelihood that game day is going to be on campus. This huge Georgia game is looming right after Arkansas. I said before the season, this game was the biggest trap game on the schedule because of who is directly after Arkansas. And I think that could have something to do, but maybe there's less of a chance that Ole Miss overlooks it because of the Kentucky game and them getting bitten.
Yeah, and I think also too, kind of in the same point, in the same vein for Arkansas, you know, they've like that LSU game, it wouldn't have mattered because they got beat, but that A&M game and the Oklahoma State game, if they didn't have one pick six, which is early in the game, but if they didn't have that pick six against Oklahoma State, and if they did not fumble on their own 6-yard line against A&M, Arkansas wins both those games. And you're talking about, hey, I know it's cliche to say, but Arkansas and Ole Miss could be going into this game 8-0, 7-1, like both teams, and game day could be coming for all we know. So, but it's amazing how that works out. But yeah, that's the thing for Arkansas in this game against Ole Miss, is that, and I'm not going to sit here and say that, oh, if they lose this game, it's all over. But Arkansas is 5-3, 3-2 in SEC play. I think fans have been okay with how the season's gone. It's definitely exceeded a lot of people's expectations. They got 3 SEC wins, which is triple what they had a year ago. But you got Texas coming up. They get a bye week after Ole Miss, and they get Texas at home, and which we know what happened last time Texas came to town in 2021. But then they get Louisiana Tech, which they're really bad. They should win that game. And then at Missouri, which is another game that Arkansas fans hate and get frustrated by because they seem to lose that one every time. My point is that if they beat Ole Miss this weekend, it makes Arkansas bowl eligible. They're 4-2 in SEC play, and they're going into a bye week before Texas. I mean, you talk about riding high and feeling really good about the season so far, but also about the possibilities of what could happen, where if you just win one more SEC game, you're talking about having an above 500 record. Yeah, and I think everybody's going to be rooting for Arkansas in that game against Texas too. But if they do that, they haven't had above 500 record in SEC play since 2015. So if they do that, it's really going to turn things up a notch. But if they lose this game to Ole Miss, it's going to be hard for people to believe that they're going to beat Texas or Missouri just because of how disappointing and how down they're going to be. Also about how they lose too. That's always a big key.
Thanks again for tuning into the Locked On Ole Miss and Locked On Razorbacks podcast. When we come back, we're going to do Path to Victory. We are going to give our score predictions. And I'm also going to ask John why Arkansas has never played Oklahoma for some reason, even though they're 3 hours apart. Anyway, stick around for that.
We'll continue our discussion on the Locked On Razorbacks podcast, crossover edition with the Locked On Rebels here in just a second. But hey, our friends over at 5 Hour Energy know that being a passionate football fan isn't just a hobby. It's a way of life. It takes a lot of energy to power through all-day tailgates, touchdown celebrations, or an agonizing second overtime, which is why they've created the Stan the Fan 5-Hour Energy Shot. With a special flavor called Fan Fuel, the energy shot made just for super fans like all of us, the fans who are in the first ones in the parking lot and who are the last to leave, We see you. We see you. You know what? Anytime the Razorbacks are out there, I also like to go out there and tailgate. Our tailgate's at first light, as we like to say. We set up there at 6 a.m., 7 a.m., and sometimes we're the only ones out there for a long time. But hey, that's part of it. But hey, 5-hour energy is what helps with that and keeps it going. Even if it's a night game, getting all there and making sure you're fired up to not only enjoy the tailgate, but to enjoy the game itself. 5-hour energy has you covered. 5-hour energy knows that no matter what team you root for, being a fan requires heart, soul, and a whole lot of energy. Whether you're prepping for the big tailgate or ironing your jersey, your game day to-do list is always a mile long. And that's why the limited edition Stan the Fan 5-hour energy shot is here to help you keep fueled throughout the season. What's your fan fuel this week? Whatever it is, do it with 5-hour energy. Available on 5hourenergy.com, shipped nationwide.
All right, we're back in Thunderdome. We are talking the Ole Miss Arkansas game, the dumbest game on the schedule every single year. And John, I'm just going to ask the question: what is the deal with Arkansas not playing Oklahoma? That is so weird. Y'all are 3 hours apart and they never play.
Trust me, I have wondered about this a lot, and it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Arkansas used to play Oklahoma State pretty often. I know they played them this year, and they got another game, but back in football, back when the Southwest Conference days, they would play Oklahoma State quite a bit. And the only thing I can come up with is Oklahoma never wanted to, because Arkansas has always reached out to regional opponents, especially ones that are just Fayetteville's in it. Fayetteville's awesome. Northwest Arkansas is awesome, but it's in its own area where, I mean, the closest campuses in the SEC until Oklahoma joined was like Oxford. That was like the closest one, which is 6 hours away from Fayetteville. And I think Missouri's 5.5, or maybe it's closer now too. But the point is, they're not anyone close, any major schools. But yet Oklahoma, Norman, 3 hours away, a little over 3 hours away. Makes zero sense of why they've never played. And it's really disappointing because they met a couple of times in the bowl games. And they also played in basketball a lot. They played in baseball, played in every other sport. But my only guess is that I guess Bob Stoops and Lincoln Riley and all those people were just too high and mighty to play Arkansas just 3 hours away. That's all I can figure out.
Yeah. All I know is Ole Miss is undefeated against them. I don't know what the big deal is. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, hey, listen, it takes a lot to be undefeated against a Power 5 opponent, but I don't know if Arkansas is or whatever. But hey, Oklahoma, I'm just really not upset at all that they're struggling in the SEC first year. I'm just saying that.
Yeah, and the Oklahoma fans came down the Grove. Their mind, they were completely blown away by the SEC tailgating. I guess that was the first time they actually saw real SEC tailgating. I know they had been to Auburn, but everybody's like, well, we've got an upper game. We got an upper game. And it's like, well, if you think that was an 11 o'clock kickoff, don't come for a night game.
Yeah. Well, that's like, as you saw, and I dressed up as Baker Mayfield for Halloween or whatever, because he got arrested on Dixon Street here in Fayetteville while he was the quarterback of Oklahoma, because he tried to run away from the cops and they tackled him. And it was a really big spectacle. But my joke behind that was the fact that Baker Mayfield, the starting quarterback of the Oklahoma Sooners and the Heisman Trophy winner, came to Fayetteville. He didn't stay in Norman to party it up. He came to Fayetteville, and it kind of shows you how bad Norman must be. Because Fayetteville's awesome. Like, Dixon Street's crazy and great, but it shows you how bad it is where he wants to drive 3 hours to go and have a good time. So I guess Oklahoma and the party scene is just not that good.
All right, let's do paths to victory in this game. What do you see for Arkansas to win this game? How does the game look?
Well, I know I alluded to it a little bit earlier, but it's simply about turnovers. Arkansas cannot turn the ball over. And if they do, it's going to be a bad game for them, plain and simple. I think Arkansas is capable of playing a clean game. They did it against Tennessee, and that's what's crazy with Arkansas getting that win against Tennessee. Neither team turned the ball over. So, and Arkansas needed that, because if they would turn the ball over one time, it would have been over and Tennessee would have won. So it shows you just how small a margin of error there is when it comes to turning the ball over. But to me, that's what it is for Arkansas. If they do that and they keep Taylon Green as protected as possible, because he is a running quarterback, he can elude a lot, but still Ole Miss is really good defensive front. If they do those two things, I think those are the things that's going to help Arkansas win this game. Of course, they got to get points. That's a no-brainer. And the defense has to play well. That's a no-brainer. But the biggest problem for Arkansas has been turnovers and lack of protection to the quarterback. They do those two things, Arkansas wins this game.
I think Ole Miss needs to get out to a 2-score lead in the second half. They get out to a 2-score lead in the second half, this game is basically over. And I think they have that is their path to do it. They're not going to score a ton of points. If you're expecting them to break 30, I don't think that is going to happen. It's going to be on the defense to keep Arkansas below 14. And I'm thinking somewhere in the neighborhood. I'm going to go with 24-10. Ole Miss wins this game.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You brought up a good point about the 2-score lead. Yeah, I think if Ole Miss gets up by 2 touchdowns, 14 points, really at any point in the game, but especially in the second half, it's over because Arkansas is just not that team that's built to come from behind when it comes to that level. But yeah, here's the thing: is I think Arkansas is going to play really well in this game. I really do, and I hope I'm wrong about this, but I think Arkansas is going to fall short a little bit. They don't play well at home; they never have. I know that everyone sees that game they played against Tennessee. Yeah, and I know that's what's weird. That's what's making it so weird is that they had that game against Tennessee earlier this year, and that was great, but Arkansas still didn't play great. They just did great defensively. The offense was not good, and they didn't play well against LSU. And if Arkansas can come in here, and if Arkansas wins this game in a similar way to what they've done before, then there's truly like Ole Miss needs to not get to go to Fayetteville ever again in football because we're trying. That just means something crazy. But I just feel like Ole Miss is motivated. They're too good defensively, and that's been a problem for Arkansas. I think it's a close game. I think you see crazy things happen, but I think that Ole Miss ends up getting the victory 17-13. Low scoring affair, close game, but one that neither team plays well, but you get out of there with a win, and Ole Miss continues on. So that's what I feel like it's going to happen.
All right, that's John Neighbors from Locked On Razorbacks. What is your post-game plans for this for Ole Miss fans that might want to tune in to what you're doing?
Yeah, so we do a live stream on Inside Arkansas, the company that I own here in Arkansas, where we do all sorts of live streams and written content on InsideArkansas.com. As soon as the horn sounds, as soon as it's over, I mean, the second that the game is over, we go live on our Inside Arkansas YouTube page and social media. So we'll have a reaction to that and get to phone calls, get to chats, get to all that good stuff. And I'm sure that everyone will be very rational and very normal and sane after a game like this. But I will say, though, real quick, Stephen, that I'm glad it is an 11 a.m. game because if it does go to like 18 overtimes with this new overtime rule and everything, at least it won't be a late night for us. We'll at least be able to enjoy that in a little mid-morning action. So, but yeah, it should be good.
Absolutely. And how do you score 58 points on Mississippi State and go 0-for-7 on third down?
Man, listen, and what's craziest about that is that Arkansas going into that Mississippi State game was number 1 in the SEC in third down conversions. They went 0-for-7. They were dead last in red zone percentage offensively, and they went 9-for-9. So I don't, who knows, man? Who knows? That's what I'm saying. No one knows what to expect out of this game or out of this Arkansas team. Who knows? But let's just hope it's another epic, legendary, iconic, crazy game like it always is. So at least both teams can go through an emotional roller coaster. It'll be great.
Yeah, and any Locked On Razorback fans that want to see me either extremely elated or melting down after the game, we go live about 45 minutes afterwards, so you could probably catch both of them if you wanted to. Anyway, John, thank you very much for stopping by. We'll talk to you, honestly, next year, buddy.
All right, sounds good. Appreciate you guys.